So there's just a bunch of groups that you don't want seeing in political power. Yeah. Can anyone else explain why they're stressed out about the election?
I mean, there's pretty much just like no matter what who wins, so.
Yeah.
And there's like we're supposed to find out if gay marriage is like the right thing in a way to like get married.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't know if that's like true, and I don't know if we're like actually finding out today, but just to be safe, I don't want my sisters or sisters to be away.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, Marlo.
Kind of going off with what Avery said. Like I feel, I mean, whatever happens, happens. I mean, you don't really have any, I don't have any control over it, as a vote. But it's just like there's certain parts of like even both presidents really. There's certain parts that like I'm worried about, like people's rights to be taken away, and then I don't know.
Yeah, so you're just worried about both presidents might not be good. All right, yeah, those are some really good reasons. Yeah, is anyone stressed about like anything else, like not even the election, like anything else we're stressed about today? Like I'm stressed out about giving this lesson right now because this is my first one, and I'm not sure what I'm doing. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right, so one reason that I found about why people are stressed out about the election, and this is mostly, I didn't see it much in you guys, but what I've seen from a lot of people is that we tend to be stressed out about the election because because of idolatry, right? Because we're idolizing one or the other parties, like they're gonna solve all my problems or they're gonna solve all my problems. But really quick, what do you guys like picture about when you hear the word idolatry? What do you think of?
I think of, unless I'm saying this wrong, idols.
Yeah.
We can have different distractions in our life that we idolize, and that's what I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone else, like anybody think what they picture in their mind about when they hear idolatry?
What I first picture is just an example of an idol is a phone. I don't know
Yeah.
if someone says idol first name.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Phone.
Yeah, like an iPhone.
Go there too.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some great things. Because idolatry, because you guys seem to have gotten past this, idolatry, when we think of idols in like our American mindset, sometimes we can tend to think of like the Indians and like some other like idolatry, like rituals and stuff. But another thing about idolatry that a lot of us don't realize is like things can be idols, like money or like phones, or like people can be idols. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people tend to be stressed out about this election, is because they think that one candidate or the other are going to solve their problems, or one candidate is terrible, the other one's going to save us from it. So they're idolizing one of these candidates. They're saying this candidate's going to solve all of my problems. And yeah, that's not a good idea. I just have here, idols are when you take a good gift that God has given us and make it supreme in our lives. So our democracy right now is a good gift from God. Like our form of government is a great gift from God. We get to choose who are elected. But there are some people who are taking it too far, and they're saying that these people that are going to get elected are going to solve my problems, save us from all of this stuff. So yeah, just an example I thought of idolatry is when I was in like 5th grade through 8th grade. I had a crush on this girl, right? And I knew like everything about her while at school. I knew what class she was going to. I knew what time she'd be where during the school day. And that's just a good example of idolatry, because she was my idol at that point. Like I put her above God. Like I knew everything about her. That's all I thought about her. And it's a good gift. Love is a good gift from God. But when we take it and we put it above God, it turns into a really bad thing. And it ended up like haunting my life throughout those years, because I couldn't get like a relationship with any other girl because I was just thinking of this one girl, just a good friend relationship. So another thing about idolatry is Exodus 23 through 4. It's the first 2 commandments of the Bible. And it says, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth." And that's basically, it's really important that those are the first 2 commandments of the 10 commandments. Because what I think Martin Luther said was that it's important that they're the first 2 commandments because all the other things that follow it are because of idolatry. Like if you commit adultery, it's because you're idolizing somebody else, or if you're stealing, it's because you're idolizing getting this one thing. And that's the root of it, is idolatry is the root of, I don't want to say all, the root of most sin. I don't want to say all because I don't really know that, but most sin has its roots in idolatry. So, yeah. It's the root of most sin. That's why it's the first 2 commandments. And with this presidential election, we're falling for the trap of putting our hope in or idolizing something that's not God. We should be putting all of our hope in God. And instead, we're putting our hope in Trump or Biden or if Kanye wins the election. So one thing that can give us hope, though, is Romans 13:1. I'll let somebody else read this. Anyone else want to read Romans 13:1 real quick? Yeah, first person there who wants to read it, go ahead.
Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. Those that exist are instituted by God.
Yeah, so that verse right there, it says, no authority, let me read it word for word. There is no authority except from God, and those who exist have been instituted by God. So this is a verse that can give us peace in the election because it says no authority is put into place without God's approval. So God puts everybody with authority is there for a reason. God puts them there. And we also see that, like, I'm going to talk about this a lot later, but God works together everything for good. So all of these people are in this place for a reason. If, like, a lot of people don't like Trump, but God put Trump there for a reason, even if it's hard for us to see it. Another good example of idolatry I saw, does anybody know that video where while Trump was getting inaugurated, there's this woman screaming, "No!" like the whole time? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It was like a meme for a while.
I kind of want to see it now.
Let me see if I can show you it. I had it pulled up. That would be awesome if I could pull it up on the screen. Oh, my data's better. So
Our homes are truly move-in
this is
ready.
my favorite
High quality,
video.
affordable, and full of upgrades and features, including dream kitchens.
Let me start it over again.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. What a great honor to be able to introduce for the first time ever anywhere the 45th
That is obviously a very good example of idolization because this woman, she had put all of her faith in Hillary Clinton, that Hillary Clinton was going to stop Trump. And now that, because Hillary Clinton failed her, she didn't win, her world is shattered. And she's like, no, this can't be happening. Because, like, she had put all of her hope in Hillary Clinton instead of putting all of her hope in God. Because if she put all of her hope in God, she'd see Trump is elected and think, God's going to use him for good, instead of thinking, no! So, yeah, that's just a really good example of idolatry. And it's also really funny. I find that very funny. So, yeah, so putting our faith in man who will fail us is what idolatry is, putting our faith in man or something else who is going to fail us instead of God who is never going to fail us. So, yeah, so in Romans 15:13, it says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope." So by the power of the Holy Spirit we abound in hope, not by the power of man, when we put all of our hope in God. And hoping in anything else is useless and just going to lead to sorrow later when man fails us. All right, and here we get to, this is my favorite Bible verse. Does anybody want to read Romans 8:28? Yeah. This is my favorite Bible verse. It just gives you so much hope and peace.
I'm trying. Okay, 8:28.
Yes.
Okay, you want me to read it?
Yeah.
I always screw this up, so hopefully it's the right one. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose.
Yes. It says, for those who love God, all things work together for those who are called according to his purpose. And let's do a little thought experiment on that verse really quick. This is really fun for me to think about how to analyze verses, is you take a word in it and you flip its meaning. so that it is no longer, so it's like now wrong. So we think all things work together for good. The verse doesn't say no things work together for good or some things work together for good. No, the verse says that all things work together for good, which is awesome. If like something terrible happens, like your parents get divorced or you lose your job, God is working that together for good. And that just gives me so much hope and peace. And I have a lot of historical and biblical examples I'm going to go through because this is just something I think about a lot. So, first of all, going into my junior year, which was last year, I was choosing all of my courses, and something came up because I couldn't take Ambassadors and IB Spanish in the same hour. And I was really devastated about that because IB Spanish, it was going to be so much fun next year because I had like 4 of my good friends going into that class. But I couldn't take it because Ambassadors was conflicting. And then my counselor was like, hey, here are some classes you can take. And I'm like, all right, I'll take computer programming. And it turns out I had a lot of fun in computer programming, and now I'm like considering doing it as like my career, going to college for computer science. And that's just God working everything together for good, right? God was showing me that you shouldn't be taking classes because your friends are in that class. You should be taking this class. I think you would really like this class, and guiding me towards that. And so the second example is Jonah. We all know the story of Jonah, right? Jonah is called by God to go preach to the Ninevites, and he goes, no, I hate the Ninevites. I'm not going to preach to the Ninevites. And he goes in a boat and sails the other direction. And then God causes a storm to happen, and the people on the boat figure out that it's him, he's the reason why the storm is happening. So they throw him overboard, and he's eaten by a fish. And then he's sitting there in the fish, and he's like, all right, God, I'll do what you want, I guess. And then God spits him out onto where the Ninevites are, and he goes in and tells the Ninevites about God, and they all get saved. And Jonah's just sitting there just like, I knew you were going to save them, God. That's why I didn't want to go. I knew you were right. It's really funny because he's really upset that God is gracious and good. And that's God working all things together for good. He's using this guy who hates the Ninevites. Like, he's basically a racist. He hates the Ninevites so much. And he saved the Ninevites with this guy. And also, like, the fish stuff is just awesome example of that. Getting eaten by a fish. And this one, I'm not sure how good of an example this is, but Hitler. If you think about it, he started the human rights movement, right? Because, like, back in that time, in America, for example, like, racism and sexism was still pretty cool. Like, nobody really batted an eye at it. And then World War II happened, and we were like, he's killing all the Jews. That's not a good idea. We should stop doing that. And then we started applying that to all the other people, and because Hitler did this, it made people think about human rights, and it really kick-started the human rights movement. If that didn't happen, it probably would have been a lot slower. Another example is Joseph, right? We know the story of Joseph. He's in this family of 12, and his father is favoring him, gives him this coat, and his brothers hate him for that, because his father's tearing apart the family system by favoring one of the kids. And they're like, we're going to kill him. And at the end of the day, they're like, no, we're not going to kill him. We'll just sell him into slavery. So he gets sold into slavery, and then he ends up at Potiphar's house, which is a very prominent person, and ends up getting involved in a rape accusation. He's accused of raping his wife. So he goes to prison, and then in prison, he gets brought out, and through the magic of God, which is basically how we can explain it, he gets to be the second in command in Egypt. And that's just, if you look through the entire story of Joseph, you're like, this sucks, this is terrible, why is all of this happening to him? It's such a bad scenario. And then at the end of the day, you can look back and see how God was using all of that for good. And he even says at the end of Genesis 50, at the end of his story, he's talking to his brothers who sold him into slavery and almost killed him. He says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. He spells it out. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And that's like the whole message of Romans 8:28. God uses everything for good. And my last example I have written down, which is probably my favorite example, is King Henry VIII from England. Does anyone know the story of King Henry VIII? It's very interesting. Basically, he's the king of England, and he's a very good king of England. He loves the Catholic Church, all that stuff. He's married to this wife, and his wife's not giving him an heir. Like, she's had, I think, 5 pregnancies that didn't end up with him getting a male heir. So his eyes start wandering, and he looks at some other maid, and she's like, I want to be married to you, not just be one of your side chicks. So he goes to the Pope, and he's like, the Pope, you gotta do something. I gotta get this divorce. And the Pope is like, no. So he's like, all right, screw the Catholic Church. So basically, he gets rid of a lot of Catholic Church stuff, and he basically kickstarts the Protestant movement in England, which, if you didn't know about me, I don't think Catholicism is a good idea. So I think that this was just God using a horny dude to kickstart the Protestant Revolution. I think that's really funny and really awesome, how God uses something like a king who really just wants to get married to another person to kickstart a revolution of his religion. It's amazing. Can anyone else think of any other examples of this kind of stuff? Drew.
It kind of, I go through that a lot where something bad happens and you're like, man, this sucks. I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And then, in middle school, my whole testimony is based off of that. In middle school, I used to get picked on a lot, and people were not nice to me, and I was way too nice to others, and that ended up hurting me. But I see now why that was happening, because I just brain farted, man. Because I didn't stick up for myself, and I just thought I needed to be nicer,
Yeah.
And so it's good because now I know why that happened, and I can use that to help other people.
Yeah.
And that's really my whole life is I want to be a therapist when I grow up. I want to use my experiences and use other people's maybe bad or good experiences to help other people prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And help them through that. So it's really cool to see that on a daily basis of this it could be I didn't have enough time to get coffee this morning. That's man, I really wanted that coffee, but now I know why that is, because I need to make time for it. I need
Yeah.
to wake up earlier, or you learn that after you find the big things that happen, the big bad things that happen, and you later find out oh, that's why that happened, you learn to look for it, and so you look for the little things that happen in your day that oh, that kind of sucks, and you use that and you look for that, and then you have that more open-mindedness, I guess, of, well, this could have happened because of this, or
Yeah.
this could have happened because of this, and you just kind of figure out why that happened.
Yeah.
So it's you can use that negative impact to create a better understanding, and to use that for a better outcome.
Yeah, exactly. It turns into a mindset of when something bad happens, it's all right, how is God using this to do good? And for your first example, people making fun of you, which I think we can all agree is objectively bad. Don't make fun of people. It's not nice. But God used that in Drew's life to kickstart the career she wants to go into. And that's just a really awesome thing, to use that experience. God uses that experience to help you to go into whatever you want to do later. So after that, you heard all of these stories about how God does everything for good. But can we really trust God? He's just this guy up in the universe, right? But the first thing to understand about that is that we can't control our own lives. We suck. And that's everyone. That's not just us here. That's everyone in the world. So Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." If we go back to the cool verse exercise I did later, what it's not saying, "For none have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." For some have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. No, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And that's just a really hard thing to hear, because everybody what's preached today with Disney movies is it's all inside your heart and you just need to be yourself. But it's all of us have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And another story that really exemplifies this is in 2 Samuel 6:6-7. I'm not going to read it all, but basically what happens is they're bringing the Ark of the Covenant into this room, and the oxen stumbles and it slips and it's about to hit the ground. And this guy named Uzziah is oh, and then he touches it and puts it back up. And God smites him for that. Why did God smite him for that? He just dies because he touched the Ark of the Covenant. He was doing a good thing by stopping it from falling into the dirt, right? But actually, this is showing how God would rather have the Ark of the Covenant fall in the dirt than have us in our natural sinful state touch the Ark of the Covenant. That is just such a powerful message of he'd rather have dirt on it than us touch it. That's just what we are in our natural sinful state. But the second part of that, because that's a bummer message, like I'm just going to say, oh, you all suck, bye. That's a really bummer message, right? But what we can see also in the Bible, the most recognizable verse in the Bible, and the one after it, is John 3:16 and John 3:17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. And Romans 5:6-8 puts it in a lot better, it puts it in better context too. Paul says, for while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us, that in while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God looked at our human race, for all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And he said, I love these people. And he sent his Son to die for us. Think about that. If you had a son, and you could it's like that train problem. If you had a son, and you had to sacrifice your son to save all of these people, would you do it? A lot of people wouldn't do that. It's really hard to do that because that's your son. And these people don't do anything. They don't give anything to you. Half of them don't even acknowledge you as the creator of the universe. But he sacrificed his Son for us. And that's just so good. That shows how much he loves us, is he would sacrifice his one and only Son to save us. And that's just such an awesome message. It's just so good. He saved us, who suck. It's amazing. So just, if you aren't saved, I pray that today that you would see the magnitude, how much sinful we are, and then compare that to the magnitude of love that God has for us. And if you're not saved, you can talk to me or Drew or Kendra, probably not me because I have to leave soon, about that. And you could talk to us and get that, and we'd be really glad to help you out with that. So the application for this is, remember we're talking about the election? The application for this is, no matter who gets elected, whether it's Trump or Biden or Kanye or whatever third-party candidate, whatever, they're not going to get elected. Whichever one gets elected, God's going to use them for good. And we have hope in that. We have a peace in that. Because we are putting our hope and our faith in God and what he's going to do with these candidates instead of what the candidates can and can't do. And that just gives us such a hope. And the second part about that is putting your trust in God. It's really hard to trust God, and that starts taking away your control in your own life. But when you start putting your trust in God, good things happen because God knows what's best for you, and God works together all things for good. So just working on putting your full trust in God. And third part about it is just pray about that. Pray about it. Ask God to help you put your trust in him. Ask God to help give you peace over the election if that's what you're really worried about. So, yeah. So that's the end. Pray about it and have peace that God will do everything for good.